My phone pinged with a WhatsApp notification. I picked it up, expecting another excuse from Eric about working late, but what I saw made my hands shake. "I'm done with you. Moving to LA with my new girl. You'd better check our savings account. Have fun being broke." My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I typed back, "Good for you," followed by a thumbs up emoji. I set the phone down and smiled. The arrogant idiot had no idea what was coming. My name is Lucy Winters, and at 42, I've spent the last 18 years married to a man who's cheated on me for at least half that time. I live in Sacramento with our two teenagers, Zoe and Jason, who are 16 and 14 respectively. I've built a comfortable life as a real estate agent while Eric climbed the corporate ladder at a tech company, accumulating wealth and, apparently, mistresses along the way. What I want is simple: justice. I want my children to be secure. I want what's rightfully mine, and I want Eric to face consequences for his betrayal. What stands in my way? My soon-to-be ex-husband thinks I'm a pushover, a naive, trusting wife who turns a blind eye to his business trips and late nights at the office. His message wasn't a surprise. In fact, I'd been counting on something like it. For the past 6 months, I've been documenting his affairs, tracking financial statements, and building a case that would make any divorce attorney salivate. The new girl he was running away with? That was Jasmine, a 22-year-old aspiring actress who didn't know that I was the one paying her salary. Yes, I'd hired her 3 months ago to be the honey in my trap, and Eric had taken the bait spectacularly. My phone pinged again. This time it was from my private investigator, Harold. "He's booked 2 first-class tickets to LA for tomorrow morning. She's confirmed for the meetup tonight." Perfect. Everything was going according to plan. But as I opened my laptop to check our joint savings account, my stomach dropped. He hadn't been bluffing. The balance showed a withdrawal of $220,000 made just hours ago. That was considerably more than I'd anticipated. What else was he hiding? Eric and I met in college. He was the charming business major, and I was studying communications with dreams of becoming a journalist. We married right after graduation, and I put my career aspirations on hold to support his. When he landed his first big job, we moved across the country, away from my family and friends. I was pregnant with Zoe by then. I threw myself into motherhood and being the perfect corporate wife. I hosted dinner parties for his colleagues, maintained our home, and raised our children while he traveled for work. When Jason started kindergarten, I got my real estate license, something flexible I could do while still managing our family life. For years, I believed we had a good marriage. Yes, Eric could be dismissive and self-centered, but he provided well for us. The first sign something wasn't right came 7 years ago, when I found a receipt for an expensive women's bracelet that I'd never received. When confronted, Eric claimed it was meant to be a surprise for my birthday, 3 months away. I chose to believe him. Then came the perfume scents on his shirts, the mysterious weekend conferences, and the increasingly frequent late nights. Each time I expressed concern, he'd make me feel irrational and controlling. "You sound crazy, Lucy," he'd say. "Do you think a man in my position has time for affairs? I'm working to give you and the kids everything." And I'd back down, doubting myself. After all, we had a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, the kids were in private schools, and we took lavish vacations. On the surface, we were the perfect family. It wasn't until last Christmas that something shifted in me. Eric had promised to be home for our family's celebration, but called last minute claiming his flight was canceled due to weather. That night, while the kids slept, I checked the airline's website. There were no cancellations. It was the first time I had concrete proof he'd lied. Instead of confronting him, I began paying attention. I noticed how he kept his phone face down and took calls in another room. How he had a separate credit card I never saw statements for. How he'd become increasingly critical of my appearance, my intelligence, my contributions to our marriage. One day in February, I overheard him on the phone in his home office. "I'll figure it out, babe. She doesn't suspect anything. No, Lucy's not that smart." That was the moment I realized I'd been played for a fool. Not just recently, but for years. Something cold and calculating awakened in me that day, a part of myself I didn't know existed. I wasn't going to confront him or beg him to love me. No. I was going to make a plan. 6 weeks after I overheard Eric's phone call, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop across from Harold Barnes, a former police detective turned private investigator. I'd found him through a divorce attorney friend who promised he was both discreet and thorough. "Mrs. Winters," Harold said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "You were right about your husband." The folder contained photos of Eric with 3 different women over the span of just 2 weeks. In one set, he was entering a hotel with his marketing director. In another, he was kissing a blonde woman outside a restaurant in San Diego, a city he'd claimed he was never in during that business trip. "There's more," Harold continued. "He has a separate apartment in the city under an LLC. He takes women there at least twice a week." I flipped through the photos, feeling strangely calm. Each image should have been a dagger to my heart, but instead, they were just confirmation of what I already knew. "What about finances?" I asked. "That's where it gets interesting." Harold pulled out more papers. "He's been moving money into offshore accounts for at least 3 years. Small amounts at first, but larger transfers recently. He's building a nest egg you wouldn't be able to touch in a divorce." That was the moment the full weight of Eric's betrayal hit me. This wasn't just about sex or midlife crisis flings. He'd been systematically preparing to leave me financially devastated. "What are my options?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Harold leaned back. "Standard approach? Document everything, get a good lawyer, prepare for a nasty court battle that could take years. And the non-standard approach?" A hint of a smile crossed his face. "That depends on how much justice you're looking for." That night I couldn't sleep. I paced our bedroom, the room we'd shared for 18 years, trying to reconcile the man I married with the calculating stranger in those photos. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the red flags I'd ignored, the years I'd wasted loving someone who saw me as disposable. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and called in sick to work. Then I drove to our bank and opened my own account. I transferred my commission checks there, removing my name from our joint checking account. It wasn't much in the grand scheme, but it was a start. When I got home, I searched Eric's office. Behind his college diplomas, I found a small safe I never knew existed. It took me 3 tries to crack it. Our wedding date? No. His birthday? No. Finally, Zoe's birthday. Bingo. Inside were documents for the LLC Harold had mentioned, account information for banks in the Cayman Islands, and a second passport. I photographed everything and put it back exactly as I'd found it. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from anger. Eric hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been living a double life, methodically covering his tracks, and planning an exit that would leave me and our children with nothing. As I sat at our kitchen island, surrounded by the life we'd built together, I made my decision. I wasn't going to be a victim in Eric's story. I was going to write my own ending. I just needed the perfect plan. 2 days after discovering Eric's safe, I met with Olivia Perkins, the most cutthroat divorce attorney in Sacramento. Her office was sleek and intimidating, much like the woman herself. "With what you've shown me," she said after reviewing my evidence, "we could secure a favorable settlement, possibly 50% of the known assets." "Known assets being the key phrase," I replied. "I believe he's hidden millions." Olivia nodded. "That's common, and unfortunately, sometimes those funds are never recovered. Courts move slowly, and money moves quickly." "What if I could prove exactly where the money is before filing for divorce?" "That would change everything," Olivia said. "But surveilling financial records without authorization could create legal problems for you." I needed more than just suspicions and glimpses of bank statements. I needed concrete proof of Eric's financial deception, and I needed it without breaking any laws myself. When I got home, Eric was there unexpectedly, working from his home office. Seeing him sitting there, casually betraying me with every email and phone call, made my blood boil. "Hey," he said, barely looking up. "I need to go to New York next week. Some big client wants to meet in person. I smiled, knowing full well there was no New York client. No problem. How long will you be gone? 4 days, maybe 5. He finally glanced at me. You seem different lately. Everything okay? Just busy with work, I lied. Actually, I've been thinking about taking a real estate course to get specialized certification. It would mean evening classes twice a week. Eric looked relieved, probably at the thought of having more freedom for his affairs. Sure, whatever makes you happy. That small exchange gave me my first opening. With evening classes as an alibi, I could begin the next phase of my plan. I called Harold and asked him to meet me again. I want to set a trap, I told him when we met in a park, far from anyone who might recognize me. Something that will expose not just his affairs, but his financial schemes. Harold looked skeptical. What did you have in mind? He's always gone for the youngest, prettiest woman in the room, I explained. I want to hire someone to get close to him, someone who'll report back to us. You want to hire a honey trap? That's risky territory, Lucy. But I was determined. Not just any honey trap. I want someone so perfect, so obviously interested in his money, that he'll reveal everything trying to impress her. And I want everything recorded. Harold reluctantly agreed to find someone suitable, warning me that such evidence might not be admissible in court. But I wasn't necessarily thinking about court anymore. 2 weeks later, Jasmine entered the picture. 22, gorgeous, and a struggling actress with impressive improvisational skills, she was perfect for the role. I paid her generously from my private savings, with bonuses for specific intelligence gathered. Meanwhile, Eric's behavior worsened. He'd stopped trying to hide his late nights and unexplained absences. Twice, he accidentally called me by another woman's name. It was as if he was trying to push me toward asking for a divorce, no doubt on his terms, when his financial arrangements were complete. I played along, acting increasingly distant and distracted. I even left printouts of apartment listings visible on the kitchen counter. Every night, I documented his comings and goings, forwarded suspicious emails to my private account, and built my case. Then came a text from Jasmine. He took the bait. Dinner tonight. We'll record everything. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. My marriage wasn't just ending. It had never been real in the first place. 3 months into my plan, Harold handed me a USB drive. You'll want to hear this privately, he warned. That night, after the kids were asleep, I plugged it into my laptop and listened to Eric telling Jasmine about his suffocating marriage and his plans to leave me broke. She's such a fool, Eric's voice said clearly. 18 years, and she still thinks those business trips are real. Meanwhile, I've got accounts she doesn't even know exist. How much have you saved? Jasmine asked, her voice flirtatious. Over 2 million, safely tucked away where she can't touch it. By next month, it'll be closer to 3. I listened as he boasted about properties purchased through his LLC, investments made with money siphoned from our joint accounts, and his plan to file for divorce once everything was secured. What about your kids? Jasmine asked. Eric's response chilled me to the bone. They're almost grown. Lucy can have custody, less child support that way. I'll send money for college directly to them, make myself look like the generous dad while she struggles. I had expected to discover financial betrayal, but the casual cruelty with which he discussed abandoning his children shook me to my core. This wasn't just about money or infidelity anymore. This was about a man willing to discard his family without a second thought. The next recording was from a week later, in what sounded like Eric's secret apartment. I'm thinking we should go away together, he told Jasmine. Maybe LA? I've got connections there, could set you up with auditions. What about your wife? Jasmine asked. I'm done with Lucy. Been done for years. Once I tie up some loose ends with the Cayman accounts, we're free to go wherever we want. The recordings continued, each more damning than the last. In the most recent, Eric detailed exactly how he planned to empty our shared accounts just before telling me he wanted a divorce, leaving me scrambling financially while he tied everything up in court. With this evidence, I called an emergency meeting with Olivia and Harold. "We need to move quickly," Olivia said after reviewing everything. "He's clearly planning to act soon." "I want more than just a fair divorce settlement," I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. "I want him to lose everything." Harold exchanged glances with Olivia. "There's a way," he said slowly, "but it's risky, and you'd have to be willing to let him think he's won initially." Together, we crafted a plan more elaborate than anything I'd originally imagined. Jasmine would continue her role, encouraging Eric to make his move. Meanwhile, I would appear to be falling apart, missing work, emotional outbursts. Exactly what Eric would expect from a desperate wife. Most crucially, I would transfer small amounts from our joint savings into a decoy account, one that Eric would discover if he went looking, making him believe his plan to leave me broke was working. "The goal is to make him act rashly," Olivia explained. "Men like Eric make mistakes when they think they're winning." The final piece came together when Harold introduced me to Thomas Geller, a forensic accountant specializing in hidden assets. "If the money exists, Tom will find it," Harold promised. Within weeks, Thomas had traced Eric's financial web through shell companies and offshore accounts. The full picture was staggering: $3.4 million hidden away, real estate in 3 states, and investments specifically structured to be difficult to trace. "He's good," Thomas admitted, "but not as good as he thinks. He's left fingerprints everywhere." Armed with this knowledge, I was ready to spring the trap. In our final planning session, Jasmine received her most important instructions. "Get him to LA," I told her. "Make him think it's his idea, but it needs to happen within the next 2 weeks." Jasmine nodded. "And once we're there?" "Disappear," I said simply. "Let him panic. Let him realize he's been played. And most importantly, make sure he transfers a significant amount of money to you first." Harold looked concerned. "That borders on entrapment." "No," I corrected him. "That's justice." Everything was in place. I'd secretly filed for divorce with Olivia the previous week, with the papers ready to be served at the perfect moment. Thomas had documented all of Eric's hidden assets, and Harold had collected enough evidence of infidelity to satisfy even the strictest judge. The night before Eric's planned escape, he came home late. I pretended to be asleep as he packed a suitcase, taking his most valuable possessions. In the morning, he announced he had an emergency business trip. "How long will you be gone?" I asked, playing the oblivious wife one last time. "Not sure," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Probably a week. Don't wait up." After he left, I received confirmation that he'd withdrawn $220,000 from our joint savings, nearly everything left in the account. He'd also maxed out our shared credit cards on first-class tickets and luxury hotel reservations, exactly as we'd anticipated. Hours later came the WhatsApp message I'd been waiting for. "I'm done with you. Moving to LA with my new girl. You'd better check our savings account. Have fun being broke." I responded with a simple, "Good for you," and set the next phase in motion. First, I called our children, who were staying with my sister for the weekend, to make sure they were okay. Then I contacted Olivia, who filed an emergency petition freezing all of Eric's known assets based on the evidence of financial fraud we'd compiled. By morning, his accessible accounts would be locked. But there was a complication I hadn't foreseen. Just as I was about to call Harold with an update, I received a panicked call from Jasmine. "He's acting weird," she whispered. "He keeps making calls to offshore banks and he's paranoid about someone following him. I think he might suspect something." My heart raced. Has he mentioned me or Harold? "No, but he's talking about moving money again tonight. Says he doesn't trust the current arrangements." If Eric moved his funds now, our carefully documented paper trail could become useless. We needed him to stay put until the asset freeze took effect. "Keep him distracted," I instructed. "Tonight, get him talking about his grand plans. Record everything." After hanging up, I called Harold, who was equally concerned. "If he moves that money now, it could disappear for good." "Can we accelerate the asset freeze?" I asked. "Not without a judge's signature and at this hour." We were at an impasse. Months of planning could unravel because Eric was having a moment of paranoia. I paced my living room trying to think of a solution. Then it hit me. I called Eric, knowing he'd likely ignore it, but needing to leave a voicemail. "Eric, it's me," I said, my voice deliberately shaky. "I just got a call from American Express about suspicious charges. I told them you're on a business trip, but they want to speak with you directly. Something about fraud protection. Call me when you get this." It wasn't much, but it might make him hesitate before making any large financial moves. Credit card companies calling about fraud could spook him into lying low for a few hours. Next, I texted Jasmine. Change of plans. Make him feel like he's in control. Ask about his business success. Get him talking about himself. Jasmine was brilliant. She sent video updates throughout the evening. Eric, relaxed and boasting about his financial acumen, ordering the most expensive champagne, clearly believing he had everything under control. Most importantly, he wasn't making any suspicious calls or transfers. By morning, the emergency asset freeze was in place. Eric's accessible accounts and properties were locked pending investigation. The trap was nearly complete. But we had one final hurdle. For our plan to work perfectly, Eric needed to realize he'd been set up only after Jasmine disappeared. Too soon, and he might find a way to access his hidden funds before we could secure them. "How do we time this?" I asked Harold during our final call. "Leave that to me," he said. "I have an old friend in the LA Police Department who owes me a favor." The following evening, as Eric and Jasmine were dining at an exclusive restaurant in Beverly Hills, two officers approached their table. They spoke briefly to Eric, whose face, according to Jasmine's text, turned the color of paste. Later I learned that Harold's friend had informed Eric that his wife had reported their joint accounts emptied, and they needed to ask him some questions. No arrest, just enough to plant the seed of panic. That night, while Eric slept, Jasmine gathered her things and left exactly as planned. She left behind a note. "I don't date broke men. P.S. Lucy says hello." By the time Eric woke up alone in that luxury hotel room, every aspect of his carefully constructed escape plan was crumbling around him. And I was just getting started. Eric returned to Sacramento 3 days after his grand exit, his tail between his legs. He found the house locks changed, his belongings packed in boxes in the garage, and divorce papers waiting. When he called, raging about being locked out of his house, I directed him to Olivia. His next move was predictable. He hired Bernard Hoffman, a notorious divorce attorney known for aggressive tactics. But Bernard was no match for Olivia, especially given the mountain of evidence we had compiled. In our first court appearance, Eric arrived confident, dressed in an expensive suit with Bernard at his side. That confidence evaporated when Olivia presented the judge with detailed documentation of his hidden assets, complete with bank statements, property records, and damning audio recordings. "Your Honor," Bernard sputtered, "these records were obtained without my client's knowledge or consent. They should be inadmissible." Olivia smiled. "Actually, Your Honor, all financial documents presented were obtained through legal channels by a licensed forensic accountant, following suspicious activity reports filed with relevant financial institutions. As for the recordings, California is a two-party consent state for recordings, but all these conversations took place in public venues where there is no expectation of privacy." The judge reviewed the materials, his expression growing darker with each page. "Mr. Winters," he finally said, "these documents suggest a deliberate attempt to hide marital assets. I'm extending the emergency freeze on all accounts and properties listed here pending further investigation." Eric's face contorted with rage as he turned to me. "You planned this," he hissed. "You set me up." "No, Eric," I replied calmly. "You set yourself up the moment you decided to steal from your family." The courtroom fell silent as Olivia played selected recordings of Eric discussing his plans to leave me destitute. His voice filled the room, detailing how he'd systematically moved millions while planning to abandon his children. "Where's the girl?" Eric demanded afterward in the hallway, his face red with fury. "Where's Jasmine?" "Jasmine?" I replied innocently. "Oh, you mean the actress I hired? She's back in her theater program, I believe. She got an A on her undercover assignment. The look of comprehension that dawned on his face was worth every penny I'd spent. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly after that initial hearing. The judge, disgusted by the evidence of Eric's planned financial abandonment, ruled overwhelmingly in my favor. Beyond the equal division of known marital assets, Eric was ordered to return all funds hidden in offshore accounts, funds he could no longer access due to court orders sent to each institution. The final settlement was staggering. I received our family home, 70% of all recovered assets, totaling nearly $4 million, primary custody of our children, and substantial child support. Eric was left with a small apartment purchased through his LLC and whatever he could rebuild from his now tarnished career. His company, upon learning of his fraudulent financial activities, placed him on unpaid leave pending their own investigation. His carefully cultivated image as a successful businessman crumbled as former colleagues distanced themselves. 6 months after that fateful WhatsApp message, I sat across from Harold and Olivia in my living room, officially a divorced woman. "I've never seen someone so thoroughly outplayed," Olivia remarked, raising a glass of champagne. "He never saw it coming." Harold nodded appreciatively. "Most people in your situation either fall apart or act rashly. You played the long game." "I had good teachers," I replied, "and a very deserving student." Later that evening, as the kids were finishing homework upstairs, I received a final text from Eric. "You won. Happy now?" I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed listings for commercial real estate. With my settlement, I was opening my own brokerage firm, specializing in helping women secure financial independence through property investment. The betrayal had been devastating, but the lessons learned were invaluable. I discovered strength I never knew I possessed, built a network of trusted allies, and secured a future for myself and my children that no one could take away. As I closed my laptop, Zoe appeared in the doorway. "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in years. "I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm free."